The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering Co-op Advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. It's Live Music Friday, and later in the show, we'll hear from the frontman of the group playing Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton tonight, Aaron Borucki from Behold, True Believers.
And we'll continue drying out our Fridays for Dry January by entering the Thunderdome with the mocktail list and Jim Zakara from Hope and Olive in Greenfield.
But first...
Oh. Does he have a theme song yet?
Oh, yeah. It's Fight the Power by the Isley Brothers, and also Fight the Power, and the outro music usually by Public Enemy. So you have kind of two theme songs.
I love it.
Because who's the man? Ousmane.
I don't know if I...
love it.
All right.
Maybe that's the name of the segment. Maybe change the name of the segment. Who's the man?
No, Power of History is
works
too
better.
good.
I think so, too.
I love it.
It's time once again for our monthly segment, The Power of History, with Ousmane Power-Greene, Professor of History at Clark University. And we are heading into Martin Luther King Jr. weekend.
Yep.
There's a lot of celebration and festivities and activism that will go on this weekend, but we'll take a more historical look at Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, and in light of the upcoming inauguration on MLK Day, which I mentioned on the show the other day.
We did.
By law, it is January 20th for our Inauguration Day, and by federal law with the holiday, it does fall on the same time. It does happen occasionally, and it is happening now, but it is not lost on many people somewhat of the irony of all this.
You know, I was thinking a lot about this, and I wondered about, King's relationship with particularly Lyndon B. Johnson was very contentious, sometimes seemingly decent, but actually, through my research, I sort of learned that King actually was invited but did not attend JFK's inauguration in '61, right? And so, even in light of sort of King's emerging fame, earlier on, he was a person, pre-March on Washington moment,
Right.
He was a person who presidents and others saw as an important figure to acknowledge. And so, that's something that, maybe people aren't sort of as aware how big King was, even before he wins the Nobel Peace Prize, even before the March on Washington. He had what one activist described as sort of rock star status, really stemming out of the Montgomery bus boycott. And so one wonders, of course, what King would be thinking or doing, but the answer is probably obvious. He would be challenging, agitating, raising awareness, and doing all the things that sort of define his career.
It's interesting because we have Congressman McGovern on the show yesterday saying he will be attending. He did say that he wants to vomit. That's a quote from him.
That is.
Do you have plans on attending the inauguration of Donald Trump on January 20th?
I do. I want to vomit, but I will be there.
He did say that his wife is not attending, even though she would have been welcome to as the spouse of a congressperson.
Yep.
Ayanna Pressley, another one of the Massachusetts delegation, has said she will not be attending the inauguration. Did Martin Luther King Jr. give reason why he didn't attend JFK's inauguration prior to his real rise to huge prominence nationwide?
Yeah. Well, so the scholar uncovered it in his papers, The Invitation. So, it wasn't something that was brought up as far as, sort of the biographies go, any discussion specifically about not doing it. And this is exactly what makes history so interesting, right? Is that, you sort of are sitting there wondering how to get the angle. Where will we find that evidence to find out his actual opinion about that, right? So this is the kind of thing that we would spend time on. Hasn't been dealt with as much by the most recent biographies, but, I'm sure someone at the King Center in Atlanta or at Stanford, where much of the papers are, I'm sure they might have come across something to really give a greater context to his reasons for not going. So not 100% sure.
What was MLK's relationship with JFK going forward into his presidency and then subsequently LBJ?
Yeah,
Not to get so acronymy with MLK and JFK and LBJ.
lots of acronyms.
Initialisms, yeah.
So one way to think about it, King's relationship with John F. Kennedy just has to do more broadly with John F. Kennedy's reluctance to really make the civil rights movement a major part of his presidency, right? So really Robert F. Kennedy was sort of given the assignment to do the negotiation, do the speaking. Famously, when Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed in Birmingham, John F. Kennedy sort of famously called Coretta Scott King. And so there was that, but really their relationship was nothing like the relationship with Lyndon B. Johnson, who, after Kennedy's assassination, made the Civil Rights Bill, which will be passed in '64, a central part of what he believed should happen.
Right.
And he, did what sometimes they talk about during the Civil War, is wave the bloody shirt, right? Which means for everybody out there, using the death, of John F. Kennedy as a mechanism to pressure Congress, people to pass the Civil Rights Bill, saying it's sort of John F. Kennedy's dying word. So
Because every cause gets a martyr.
there you go.
Yeah, but it's always been interesting to me that, JFK was somewhat reluctant while president, and yet his legacy kind of becomes the Civil Rights Act after his death because LBJ brings it to the fore, when I've always had the impression, and it could be my own biases, that LBJ was not as keen on some of these ideas as JFK might have been.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is really clear. King really emerges on the scene with the Birmingham movement, right, in the spring of '63. By June of '63, John F. Kennedy will give his famous speech essentially calling for civil rights legislation. And it's one of the clips that if people have seen images of President Kennedy speaking about civil rights, it's usually that speech they're seeing, right? So part of the reason why his legacy becomes so tied to it, despite sort of how brief that is because ultimately he comes around and he realizes that it's going to be central that he get on board with the civil rights movement. And this is, in many ways, the success of grassroots activists in Birmingham who convinced King to come in the first place, and then it becomes the major, probably one or two, besides Montgomery bus boycott, a major sort of movement, during the civil rights movement.
I know that RFK, his Secretary of State and brother, was tasked, as you mentioned, to kind of handle this issue. And I know that there was a very contentious meeting with him and Harry Belafonte, among others. Do you know much about that conversation and what went on there? And I think that became a pivotal moment in the Kennedy presidency as well.
Yeah, I mean, so overall, Harry Belafonte actually was a person who was working behind the scenes throughout the movement.
Yeah.
Using his sort of notoriety, using a celebrity in order to support student activists specifically. That's one of his great accomplishments, but also being able to get people in room with people like Robert F. Kennedy, and so it's not too surprising that heated conversations and confrontations would happen when you have a figure like Harry Belafonte who saw himself and was a bridge figure, not having politicians understand, how important, how central it is, and that as many people realize in social movements that the wave is coming. Either you can get on board, or you can stand behind it. So that was a lot of what the tension was ultimately about, and it was a tension that was shared throughout the movement, and particularly as we sort of begin to see the emergence of the concept of Black Power, those relationships become even more fractured. People are dressing down Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, around, in his efforts to sort of bring people to the table. Young people weren't as impressed, with his status and his stature.
We're speaking with Dr. Ousmane Power-Greene, the Power of History, our regular segment here. He's a professor of history at Clark University. Let's talk about Coretta Scott King and her legacy.
We, in no small part, have the holiday because of her.
Absolutely.
Right. It feels like there's a few-year cycle where we really focus on Coretta Scott King and what she accomplished. Then we forget about her again. And then we remember her again. So let's remember her again.
Especially because her career in activism ends up being so much longer.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so much wider than her husband's.
Right.
But she is still a woman and therefore not getting recognition.
Right.
Yay, patriarchy.
It's also a feature of historical memory, right? And how we remember the past. I mean, recent book that came out last year called King, A Life, it was one of the biographies that really gave us the viewpoint and vantage point of Coretta Scott King as she began to enter this huge world that would soon sort of consume her life and obviously her husband's life. And just a few things for listeners who don't know much about her. I mean, first of all, she was valedictorian of high school. So she is sort of foundationally the more academically intelligent than Martin Luther King Jr. So that's really important to know. She's probably correcting his speeches and, whatever, because she was raised in Alabama. She attended Antioch College in Ohio, actually, and finished 1945. And then is going to attend the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. And this is going to sort of be the moment where she meets Martin Luther King Jr.
Which is now commemorated with the sculpture on Boston Common there, which was, for some reason, somewhat controversial. I think it's an incredible sculpture.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, people always struggle with anything that's more modernist and representational. I think that really, embraces not, my students talk about it, and, I think that those that imagine the power of statues and monuments to be awe-inspiring, embraces a more sort of artistic expression of the sort of love between the two, but also the central principle that Coretta Scott King would take in her activism throughout, which is the idea and the power of love, right? The power to find middle ground, to see what elements of whatever the struggle is. I mean, she was an activist for racial economic justice, women and children's rights, LGBTQ plus dignity, religious freedom. She was anti-poverty. I mean, she found herself in this sort of guiding vision of the possibility of bringing people together in all the variety of social movements where she was asked to speak at, right? To, going back to, to the point about, with King's legacy, like really being able to bring elements of Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy to various social causes, but she was the activist who was actually there in the front lines, the anti-apartheid struggle, for example, in the 80s, right? So her legacy is really influential as a figure on her own, and for those that aren't aware of it, part of the reason it's not as well known in biographies and things is that her activism was later in the 80s. So scholars are just getting the 70s and 80s, in terms of writing books.
It takes time to get caught up.
Time. But I do believe that as we begin to really look at the social struggle in the 70s and 80s and 90s even, her role in those movements will be even larger.
If we're looking at the 70s, like her husband basically just died. Yeah. Your activism should be allowed to take a moment on the shelf while you grieve.
But ironically, hers really didn't, because her movement, that's what's so incredible, is that, after his assassination, the movement to establish Martin Luther King Day as a holiday began pretty quickly afterwards, right? And so that's what is particularly fascinating about this day, and people say, oh, well, it's Martin Luther King, we're always going over and focusing on King, but actually the struggle to get the holiday really reflects a national healing and reconciliation. When you think about the scars and the wounds of the movement, right? And so some people saw as defeats, while others see as successes. That 15-year period, that struggle for the ideals of King, not, he's, the sort of ideas behind him are going to be central to the passing holiday in 83.
Coming up, how music helps lead to the nation's acceptance of Martin Luther King Day as a federal holiday, the dangers of thinking that Martin Luther King was colorblind, and a couple of quick ideas of how you can get involved in the movement locally starting this weekend.
Plus, Live Music Friday with Aaron Borucki from Behold True Believers playing Luthier's Co-op tonight, and the dry Thunderdome with mocktails at Hope and Olive.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
We mentioned that you have theme music, Ousmane Power-Greene, and it is by the Isley Brothers and Public Enemy. And through music, I've learned a lot about the creation of the holiday. I mean, we've been playing, and we'll continue probably to play Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday song, which is in some ways a protest song about trying to create this holiday. Of course, Public Enemy very famously, had a song about Arizona, who was not willing to sign on to this holiday. Talk about the struggle to turn it into a federal holiday.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a couple ways to think about the struggle. So on one hand, this is another grassroots struggle, led by and large by Coretta Scott King to get the holiday actually passed. But it brought together a coalition of folks. And this is particularly when you think about this moment in 68, when many of the young activists had embraced sort of Black Power, which King supported, but questioned the sort of phraseology around it and its utility. But his assassination did bring together people who, famously Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, who had been more critical of King, right? And so that process of, not only assassination, but then, of course, the holiday gave people a point to sort of come together and agree on, despite their frustrations with King. Ultimately, it was the 20th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington, so we're looking at 83. A lot of the prep behind that also went into, galvanizing people to remember this really important moment in the movement. And then the other side of it was the resistance. Not everyone supported the holiday, which obviously isn't surprising. But Jesse Helms, the sort of, for some people see him as notorious. Others see him as a champion of values they support, but was from North Carolina. And he really made preventing this essential part of his career at that point. So Jesse Helms in North Carolina was one of the main people claiming that, it wasn't because of his race, it was because he was a communist, and, because of the people he hung around with, and then, of course, because of his personal life. And, he sort of tried to use everything he could to really thwart this initiative and effort, which, obviously he ultimately didn't succeed. But then the struggle after that, which is why Public Enemy made the song, By the Time I Get to Arizona, to actually get people to acknowledge it is another part of the story, right? It's sort of, all right, you have a federal holiday, but can that federal holiday become something meaningful in the sort of national imagination and the memory of the movement? And obviously it has, right? Generations born in the 80s who sort of like come of age in the 90s will see the successes, even of that song, By the Time I Get to Arizona, in terms of really forcing, every state to acknowledge it.
Can we talk, Dr. Ousmane Power-Greene, a little bit about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. in light of the incoming administration? We are seeing the dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in universities, in businesses, all across the board. And I think that there is a notion, and it comes from the I Have a Dream speech, the little black boys and little white boys aspect of the speech, the idea that Martin Luther King was colorblind, and that is the aspiration we should lead to. That is why there's a monument to him in Washington, D.C.
The idea of him from everybody who hasn't read Letters from Montgomery Jail.
Or virtually anything else he's ever written.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, especially like timeline-wise, and how just the momentum that the King-fronted movement had up until his assassination, and then you end up with this political 1-2 punch of the death of King and the death of RFK. And it puts this series of breaks on what could have been progress through standard respectable means. And it forces this shift for how the civil rights movement looks in the 70s in a very real and unavoidable way. And it's interesting for all the people who look at King's Holiday and are like, he was about like colorblindness and bringing everybody together and questioning why we don't actually have that, to look at his death and the times of his death and not realize the sea change of 68.
Well, a couple ways into that to think about. Number one is that this sort of tension between different versions of what progress looks like has always been a part of the movement. It's been a part of King's camp, everyone. And so there becomes, this notion of groupthink that that people are not diverse in their views within social movements.
Right.
So I think that part of the reason the narrative could seem so contentious and so like poles, right? And this is the case with Malcolm X, also Martin Luther King, is because people grab hold of the difference and don't realize that 40 minutes of the conversation was one where people are agreeing. 10 minutes was some disagreeing, arguing. We just focused on that 10 minutes. We missed the fact that so much comes together. And so that was epitomized actually with Martin Luther King when he and Malcolm sort of corresponded. And it also was the case with, with the Black Power advocates. And then going forward in time, it continues to be the case where there's the ideals ultimately people agree with. The question is, how do you execute them? And I think that the solutions that have dominated the past 20 years, which is having initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really compelling people who feel least comfortable to really stop and think and wonder, what's in a perspective? What are the things I'm saying and doing that potentially could create uncomfortable spaces? Those efforts have always threatened people, and now we're in a moment where we're seeing people who felt threatened by those perhaps feeling like, we don't need that anymore, and really pushing away from them. So again, more tension over whether they're needed or not, as opposed to, well, some people come out and say they're terrible, or the idea of diversity is terrible. Besides that group of people, most people think that people should be respected for who they are, but we lose sight of that because we hear the voice of those that are opposed to those sort of notions, I think. So my point is that it's very different. Everything's different than it was in 68. But at the same time, the core issue of what exactly do we agree on? How can we find a middle ground? That arrives and disappears. Maybe it's disappearing in this particular moment, but hopefully it'll arrive back. And I think that's hopefully the legacy of King, finding that middle ground.
Similarly, in looking at the holiday, it is potentially dangerous to take solely the idealism of a movement or a person without also taking into account the frustrations that they had not being able to reach those ideals.
Absolutely.
Because it makes you learn so much more about what the actual situation is, to not just take all of the rosy bits and like really just discover where the scars are and how you can actually work with them. You don't have to ignore them. It's the same pitfall of being colorblind. Like not seeing it is also a problem.
Yeah, that notion. I mean, one of the points that Coretta Scott made about King's legacy, I think, really speaks to this sort of what underpins that. And what she said, quote, was that King would say all the time, that she would repeat, that we all have to decide whether we will walk in the light of creative altruism or the darkness of destructive selfishness. I think that notion about individuals, about what we're going to do, how we're going to move forward, it doesn't get more on point than that in terms of thinking about this moment. What are we really about? You know what I mean? Are we about unity or are we about disunity, right? Are we about trying to find a middle ground, or we're about camped out in our notions that we're absolutely right and the other side is absolutely wrong? I mean, I think these are the enduring questions that continue.
Are we about ignoring our past or like learning from it and trying to be better?
Absolutely, 100%. This is something that, we're Historic Northampton's doing a session about slavery in Northampton, and much of those types of efforts, which have really picked up since 2017, right? In terms of Black Lives Matter movement, much of these efforts are to try to do that. And we've seen that all around. I've talked about it on the show. But at the same time, in these other moments where everything feels contentious, sometimes people forget that people are still doing their work and trying to get towards greater reconciliation and a greater sense of this is who we are and we need to face it, as opposed to trying to continue to bury it somewhere or ignore it.
Dr. Ousmane Power-Greene, The Power of History, our monthly segment here with Clark University professor from Northampton, Massachusetts, bringing it home to the 413 this Martin Luther King weekend. Two quick little things that have to do with MLK and the 413. We'll give a shout out to the folks. It's called Our Project 2025, Envisioning the World We Want. It's happening tomorrow, Saturday at 12:15 at Second Congregational in Greenfield. And a bunch of peace organizations are getting together to build community and to figure out what work can be done. They are inspired in no small part by friends of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who used to live on Woolman Hill in Deerfield, Wally and Juanita Nelson, who were inspirational in getting Dr. King to oppose the Vietnam War. So there are many local connections. And the fact that Dr. King spoke here in Springfield, Massachusetts, that he met Coretta Scott King, not in the 413, but in the 617.
Exactly.
So a lot of local ties to this federal holiday and this national hero.
Similarly, Bombyx is having a service fair so that you can find other organizations to go out and support in their efforts to try and make this community and world a better place.
All positive stuff.
All good things.
Dr. Ousmane Power-Greene, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Here's your Public Enemy outro.
Exactly.
Later in the show, we'll have Live Music Friday with Aaron and Abby of Behold, True Believers, who'll play at Luthier's Co-op tonight.
But first, a tasty non-alcoholic beverage, or three, as a trio of mocktails enter the Thunderdome with Jim Zakara of Hope and Olive. We can call it that.
Sure.
Hope and Olive in Greenfield.
And all three leave in our bellies after swift judgment. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Hop and Olive.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering skylights, siding, gutters, and doors. windowworldofwesternma.com.
In lieu of another wine Thunderdome, we're going to do a dry Thunderdome of sorts for dry January. We talked to the owner of the new business coming to Easthampton, Dry Humor, last week on the show. And we are at the very hustly-bustly restaurant in Greenfield, Hope and Olive, with my good friend Jim Zakara, proprietor, bartender, the Valley's best maitre d'.
Oh, of course.
That's what I think, and we're gonna do mocktails. Ooh. Every day that I've been making mocktails.
Don't mocktail me.
I had to put the DuckTales thing in there.
That's not where I was expecting you to go with that.
It could be like where we mock tales of things that you've done in your past, where we make fun of you in that way.
I love it. Yeah, I want to get bullied.
Are you all right, man? I think so. How about now?
No, we would never do that.
We're not doing that.
I thought we might try 2 of your mocktails, taste them, and see which one we like best. Thunderdome style, but not with alcohol. You have a whole mocktail section of your menu.
We do. We always do. We've had non-alcoholic drinks for many, many years now, and sort of just followed the crest of this trend. It's kind of been insane the way that things have taken off in that regard. Every time I think, oh, this isn't going to sell, and there's a niche market for that. And then, of course, always in dry January now. But year round, we constantly are selling non-alcoholic things, and it's there's with good reason. There's lots of people who want to enjoy something delicious without booze. It's a new normal now.
What are some difficult things about creating a good balanced mocktail so that it's not just juice or just soda?
Exactly. That is the challenge, because most places you go, that really is what your mocktail is. One of the most common default non-alcoholic cocktails is going to be the mojito, in quotes, which basically is
the
just
fojito.
Exactly. It's going to be soda and fruit and mint, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. And we make things like that here, which are very, very popular. But, in the last 8 to 10 years, you can get products that are amazing. The NA spirits that you can get now are delicious, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. So many new products out. And so you have the tools to make a drink as good as a alcoholic classic spirit cocktail, So how do we go about that? You take the same exact concepts as you would to apply to booze cocktails, and you find balance with new and interesting ingredients.
The thing that's funny is, if you're not somebody who drinks frequently, be it you don't drink any wine or any beer or any booze,
right,
or if a kid gets to taste it, that it's disgusting, that gin is disgusting, that whiskey is disgusting, that beer is disgusting.
Right.
Is the idea behind mocktails to figure out how to make it still taste disgusting to children, but enough like the disgusting that we love from booze.
Right. I think yes to that.
Because we just had we had a non-alcoholic sparkling wine last week, and it tasted the right kind of disgusting. It didn't taste like grape juice. It tasted bubbly and yeasty, and all the things that I love about disgusting wine.
A little bit funky, right? Those are the better NA spirits, are the ones that mimic that sort of the capsaicin burn from a tequila and the agave funk. And there's new products that really nail those. No shade on these older products. What the first NA spirits that were coming out were really boring and kind of bland and flavorless and watery. You know what I mean? And they didn't have any body. And I think what you're calling disgusting is really the intensity of flavor in certain spirits that I find really interesting. It takes some time to get to appreciate all the nuance of those things too. They can be harsh and intense at first. I think that a little less so for a lot of the NA spirits that I've had. And again, we're really just getting to a point of having NA spirits that I think are interesting and actually have a lot of quality to them. And to be honest, I haven't found anything that is meant to be like bourbon that I like yet. So we're not there yet. We're not there yet. As far as I've experienced, people...
Bourbon in particular, or whiskeys in general?
The NA whiskey category is, I haven't found one that I like. So we're still waiting on that. People tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know. There's one you like. Yeah.
But on the flip side, there's been really cool progress with Amaro that's NA that I think is really, really neat. So if you're
some cool ones.
if you're into botanicals and that aspect of mixology, there's a lot more coming out for you to play with.
It is blowing up. It's really been amazing, and we're really lucky to have all those options, because like you said, it used to be just juice and soda and some sort of bland thing. Now it's actually, you can really refine stuff. It's pretty cool. So we're gonna try some drinks. You want to try some drinks?
Yeah, I do.
Yar.
Oh no.
What do you think is harder?
Here they come.
Oh, here they come.
Oh my
Perfect
gosh.
timing.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great.
What did you make for us here, Andrew?
I did not make them. Katie made them.
Shout out to Katie.
I'll let Tim tell you about it.
One of these has a candied hibiscus on it, and that is the coolest.
It really is very cool. It's like a little alien fruit.
And immediately they smell like cocktails, but I think it's probably from the zested orange peel or whatever you've done with that.
Yeah.
The less gross things that come with most cocktails.
Yeah. So we have 3. You talked about having 2. Do you want to choose 2, or do you want to talk about all 3?
Oh, hell. It's dry January. Let's do all 3.
Let's go crazy.
Do the triple wine. Because we can go crazy because we're not going crazy.
That's right. Overindulge if you want in these. You're just going to have to pee more.
The older I get, the more that happens too.
That's right. Let's start with the one that's not on our menu. This is a Negroni variant, and this is made with a gin. The brand is called Dos, spelled D-H-O-S, and it is really delicious all by itself. It has that big nose of botanical juniper, coriander hit, and it's very flavorful. Makes a very nice alternative cocktail. This has also a non-alcoholic sweet vermouth, and something that's like a bitter. Khalees was talking about the Amaros that you can have. This is like a Campari sort of bitter aperitivo that is non-alcoholic as well. And so those are equal portions of those three. Would you like to taste it? Khalees, you start. Yes.
Jim and I share germs all the time anyway, so it won't matter. No comment.
That's pretty convincing. Yeah, I mean, like, you're not going to get the burn because it's no alcohol, but, like, it's got this really nice pepper note that hits right in the middle of the palate. Like, It's got the right balance of, like, bitter and a little bit of sweet that you were expecting in a Negroni. Totally lovely.
I just like that we have all the components to make this and make it pretty darn well. You don't get the alcoholic burn, and that's okay because that's not what you want.
That's
and
not what you want.
Yeah, it's really good.
Honestly, that's not what you want in a regular Negroni anyway.
Right, you want it balanced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but you're exactly right. It feels almost lighter and more refreshing as a Negroni.
Absolutely delicious. I love that drink. Not currently on the menu, but well worth asking for.
Do you just call it a non-alcoholic Negroni, or do you have a fancy name for it?
Well, you already poo-pooed the faux mojito or whatever you call it, the faux-hito.
I didn't poo-poo it.
You did. Your tone.
No, I love wordplay.
We do call it, for lack of a better name, the faux-groni.
Not the Nafoni?
No phony. I like a no-groni is pretty funny, too.
No grony?
No
I like
grony. Yeah. Sounds like naughty parts.
Yeah, I'm having another sip. I like it so much.
I also really like that, like, there's so much aromatic happening there that, like, it's almost got its own bouquet in a way that you wouldn't necessarily get from a standard Negroni either. It's really neat. It ends up being kind of its own thing.
Yeah, it does. It makes me want to go back for more.
Yeah.
You know? Moving on to this one. This is made by our bartender, Katie. This is called the Calyx Cooler, and it is a hibiscus, tequila, ginger, and lime soda. It's served tall. It's very pretty. Khalees was commenting on the candied hibiscus flower that's on top of it, and it's really nice. Khalees, you want to start again?
Yes.
All right.
Does calyx have a meaning to it?
C-A-L-Y-X. It's a part of the hibiscus flower.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's great.
You can try it with a straw. You're gonna get the whole flavor.
That's super gingery in a really good way.
Yeah.
What it reminds me of is that, like, since this is the season for it, I've been making a lot of sorrel. It reminds me a lot of some of the key flavor elements in that.
Yep. It's definitely, there's a lot of big flavors in that. You don't get a whole lot of that tequila flavor straight. This tequila with soda, the non-alcoholic tequila, delicious, just straight with a little lime. It's very good.
And it's not overly gingery. Like, you definitely get the hibiscus too. Like, they're really balanced, but, like, you got a little bit of that extra fire from the ginger.
Yeah, the ginger gives it the little bit of burn that does even more allude to an actual alcoholic cocktail than the Nafoni. What was it again?
No, the faux-groni.
No groiny.
No groiny. And so this, again, it's an example of something that doesn't just taste like soda and citrus, and it's a few steps above.
Do you eat the candied hibiscus?
Yeah, you sure can. Go for it.
You have a bite now.
No, I actually have sometimes Trader Joe's sells the candied hibiscus, and I have a bag at home.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about
for packs. Go for it.
My 11-year-old is over there. That's the other fun thing too. Packs will come out to a restaurant and now can. I don't know if it's good parenting or not.
Right.
But they can order off the mocktail list.
A lot of this is conditioning for our future customers.
Yeah. Teach a child to drink. They'll drink for a lifetime.
So you got to start those good habits early.
Yeah.
All right, last drink. This is the Persian Palm. It's the gin that we had in the faux-groni. It's the non-alcoholic Dos gin, pomegranate, maple, and lemon. And this is it's akin to like a sour drink, so it's got limited ingredients. It's not soda. It's shaken and served over a large ice cube. So, Khalees, try it out.
It's earthy. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that at all. That's wicked cool.
Yeah. Probably if we're voting, I'm going to say that might be my favorite on the list at the moment. Also made by bartender Katie.
We love bartender Katie.
She's smart.
She is. The weird thing about all these, I've been in like so much immersive theater through Egg Tooth Productions, which is also based in no small part in Greenfield and Franklin County. They use a lot of scents.
Oh yeah.
When you're in an immersive production. At least 2 of these make me feel immediately like I'm in an immersive theater thing.
Yeah, there's something happening.
Yeah, this experience just got immersive.
I'm feeling taken away.
Calgon, take me away!
The pomegranate and maple is really where the magic lies in that drink. It's really a great combination, a delight.
If it were red wine, I would say it was forest floors, like a petrichor thing happening, which is super cool and just unexpected. I love it.
Khalees, have you done Dry January before?
No, I'm not doing Dry January now.
Yeah,
we're just doing it for the show. Neither am I.
I didn't know that. I didn't expect that you were. I would have been surprised actually. I honestly am doing something like a cleanse, but I've only minimized my drinking as opposed to eliminated it because I knew that I would fail if I told myself that I was. So, and I've been trying to drink wine and not a whole lot of like straight alcohol and beer. Definitely, I have cut back on my beer a lot.
Do you see an uptick in the mocktails because of Dry January?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And actually, I was talking to Christy from Ryan and Casey Liquor Store.
We just had on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, she said it's insane. The demand for whole bottles of NA spirits is just going crazy. Also, everyone's going nuts for those THC drinks that they got the cans there.
Also, California sober Dry January.
Exactly. California sober on the highway. Different vibe, but those are good. The ready-to-drink canned cocktail category, also the NA version of that and the THC versions are all delicious. So many fun options, but yeah, there's big demand for the NA stuff now and all year long.
Is there advice that you have for bartenders who find it hard to come up with mocktails? Because I've had people say to me it needs to be looked at more like a chef would look at a beverage as opposed to like a bartender would look at a beverage.
Huh. That's a really good point. I always look to culinary for inspiration for drink combinations and flavor profiles and trying to balance things out. That's a general approach, I think, to all drink making. And at this point, like I said, because the quality of the NA spirits have gotten so much better, I don't have to really differentiate as much as I used to. We just have so many more tools in the toolbox now. It's great, but it's still a niche market, you know. So you really you want to keep it as accessible as possible. Really like big flavors that have wide appeal.
Okay, we're at Hope and Olive with purveyor Jim Zaccara doing our Dry January Dry Thunderdome. 3 mocktails enter. 1 mocktail leaves. We have the, not quite on the menu, but they'll still make it for you, Negroni-esque type drink. We've got the Calyx Cooler with the candied hibiscus with a faux tequila, and the Persian Palm with a faux gin, pomegranate, maple, and lemon. Do you know which one's your favorite, Khalees?
Yeah, it's the Persian Palm. That's such a surprise. It has not at all the flavor profile I was expecting from the list of ingredients. It's wicked cool.
And you have a favorite?
I would agree.
So it doesn't matter what my vote is.
Yes.
My vote has been rendered useless. The Persian Palm wins, which I love.
Yeah.
But I also was really surprised by the Calyx Cooler. It's light and refreshing.
Sure is.
And the ginger gives it that little burn, so yeah. Feels healing and soothing at a time where you may be trying to heal and soothe your body this month after all of the non-healing and soothing that you may have done in December. Yeah.
Cleansing the liver.
No, the liver is evil and must be punished.
It is cool that it regenerates itself. I do love that. You know, like all those animals that you can pull off their tail and they grow a tail back. Yeah. We have very few things you can do that with, but our liver, to a certain extent, will regenerate itself.
You know, you can always just get the parts replaced.
You ended with this?
Every time I hear mocktails now, I want to hear the DuckTales theme.
Mocktails, woo!
Oh, 90s kids.
Thanks again to Jim Sakara and everybody at Hope and Olive in Greenfield for welcoming us and being just generally awesome.
Yes, indeed. And now for a taste of the always welcoming, intrepid, and enduring sounds of Behold, True Believers for Live Music Friday.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering skiing and snowboarding 7 days and nights a week until 10 p.m. Ticket and lesson information at skisundown.com. Winter made better. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. It's Live Music Friday, and we are joined by Aaron Borucki and Abby Hanna of Behold, True Believers.
Self-described as bombastic blasts of color and light, laser beams streak bolts through thunderous bass and drums. The band combines 4 melodic instruments and 3 vocals to form a storm in harmony.
A band drawing from influences from 50s doo-wop, 80s new wave, and 90s ducktail themes. Oh, I'm sorry. 90s pop-punk, melodic, and story-driven, swerving dangerously from funky and mysterious to surf and psychedelic.
This is music meant for everyone and is without question meant to be used for good. And tonight at 7 p.m. you can see it at Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton. Thank you so much, Aaron and Abby, for joining us.
What an intro. Thank you for having us.
Most of it you wrote, so we just delivered it.
Well, that's 99% of the battle there. It's a good collaborative effort. Thank you.
Knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe, another 90s kid
That's
reference.
80s.
Oh, yeah, 80s and 90s kid reference. Okay, but let's hear a song.
All right. Thank you. Human standing in harm's way, always impressed by a man who's brave. All will fall, we're told one day. We'll all stand tall, we're not afraid.
Standing in harm's way, never look back, not for one day. The road ahead is wide, alright, black as night, lights out highway. Standing in harm's way, could have stood up, chose to obey. Wrists, ankles, shackles, and chains taught your whole life how to be tamed. Standing in harm's way, always impressed by a man who's brave. All will fall, we're told one day. We'll all stand tall, we're not afraid.
Ooh, I love that.
Yay! Good timing for that song,
I think so, too. I'm not going to say something, but I couldn't figure out a good way to say it, and you did, Khalees. Well done. That is Aaron Borucki and Abby Hanna of Behold, True Believers, who'll be performing at Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton tonight.
Your band has been in the area for a minute, shall we say.
That's accurate.
How has your sound evolved since the early days of this band's existence?
I've gotten a lot better at guitar and singing.
It's always good.
For one thing. The rapport between the core bands, the 5 members, we've been at it for a minute, as you said, and so nobody could be here other than Abby. So Abby, thank you for being here, playing and singing tonight.
Oh, yeah.
But
Just a little special guest, yeah. You'll get the full band experience tonight at Luthier.
Indeed.
We're getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that. This is like the snack before the meal.
Yeah.
Yum.
The hors d'oeuvre, yeah.
I am hungry.
I'm getting a little hungry too. We've been at it for a really long time. The rhythm section's always been super tight. Mike Benoit on drums, Aaron Knapp on bass. Dylan Mikowski brings a whole lot of depth and dimension to the sound on keyboards and his beautiful background vocals. And my oldest friend, Justin Broussard, we've been friends for over 30 years. He and I have gone way back to our first bands playing, Pearl Street in the early 2000s and countless venues over the years. And we took a little bit of a break during the pandemic to do some recording, and we would get together to jam and really embraced a lot of improvisational music over the pandemic. Mark Rebier got really big, the guy online with a loop machine, and it really,
love him.
really inspired me to want to break out of a show because it's really easy to, when you get together, play stuff that you already know. You feel comfortable, and when you want to sound really good, you kind of ease yourself into a comfort zone where I'm going to do this because I know I'm going to do it really well. And I think, at least personally, I can speak that I spent a lot more time trying to push myself into uncomfortable territories, and I found myself really embracing the improv, and even if it's not going to be really great all the time, there's something there that you can capture, and it's kind of opened me up personally, musically, spiritually, and so I feel like we're in a really good place. We got to play a bunch of shows this year, and I think we're sounding better than we ever have. And it's sometimes when you feel like I've been doing something for such a long time, maybe it's time to move on to something else. I'm finding myself invigorated and inspired and excited to get together with my friends, and we've gotten to be so tight together that it always feels good. So I don't have to be reliant on the familiar. We've got a good musical communication going on.
Cool.
Before we hear one more song, where does the name Behold True Believers come from?
I am a big fan of Marvel Comics and Star Trek, and I guess The Simpsons doesn't really count, but that's, growing up in the 90s, certain things like nerdy stuff that you like a lot, stuff that inspires you. And so it came from walking back from what used to be Modern Myths, the comic book shop.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, I was 20-something, and I was walking downtown. I was like, I don't think there's a band called True Believers. And then it turned out there's a band down in Texas called True Believers. And when we had a show, I forget where we were playing, but there was a photo of a bunch of dudes who were definitely in more their 50s, all playing together. The True Believers are going to be playing at, the 11s tonight or something. And so it's we're going to put the prefix there with the exclamation point just to make things extra confusing for everybody.
I love it. It's like Godspeed, You Black Emperor.
Exactly.
I love it. It's really great. Well, let's hear something from Behold True Believers, who are playing at Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton tonight. We've got Aaron and Abby from the band here in Live Music Friday.
Thank you so much. This song's from a record that we put out called Oh Holyoke that we recorded during the pandemic. The song's called Running on Empty, and it's an original song. It's not the Jackson Browne song like my dad said. How'd you do that? This song is it's based on a true story. Mm-hmm. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I went skiing down the mountain in my shoes on the ice. You were the first and the last person I thought of as I fell down on my ass. It hurts to write, it's the worst when I can't. It doesn't hurt to die, doesn't ever hurt to try. I'm running out of ink, I'm running on empty, scoring the pages, the scratching, the etching. That son of a bitch, I'm so sick of his brooding and berating. Won't ever make up for this. We're dressed to the nines on a cloud, turning our lives upside down. I've been thinking all about it, how you left and I lied. I was just trying to be some good person, but to no one's surprise. Counting the deck, he's got stacks of regret atop of a mountain of spiritual debt. So raise a glass and let's all dance to forget.
to think I'm running on empty, scoring the pages, the scratching, the etching, that grouch and its gretch and his constant regret are shrouded in scrapings that add to the list. We're balls to the wall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Woo! Aaron Borucki and Abby Hanna of Behold, True Believers playing at Luthier's Co-op tonight, with Aaron having a well-versed knowledge in what is acceptable and not acceptable for the FCC.
Well
so we appreciate you self-editing the one that we would have had to hit the dump button on.
Well, I figured it's better to be safe.
Yes.
We practiced a lot, too.
It's good to keep everybody here on their toes. I love it.
Exactly. I have the quickest question. So
we literally have seconds, so answer it in seconds.
So we got to talk to you about the 168-year-old Martin guitar. How convenient is it for your band that you work at a music store?
Downtown Sounds in Northampton.
Endless amounts of shows we've played. Somebody forgets something, we walk in, like, it's really saved our bacon a lot.
See? Well-versed knowledge in the FCC. Well, thank you so much. You can check out Behold True Believers at Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton tonight. Aaron and Abby, thanks for coming in to Live Music Friday.
Thank you so much.
And check out all of their music on Bandcamp. Next week on the Fabulous 413, we're digging into a Golden Globe winner through the UMass campus with the brutalist and living examples of it in Amherst. And we're checking in on the kids and seeing how all right they are with their civics with Shirley Edgerton and a timely showing of Selma.
We're also exploring a local connection to Timothy Chalamet and Dylan as we talk about one of the other important people in a complete unknown with Patrick Pizzotti of Turn It Up Records in Northampton.
Plus a dive into digital censorship considering what just happened with the Supreme Court.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll see you on Tuesday next week on Fabulous 413.